There we go. Hi, I'm Jay Skinner, and this is the pre-show at the Buyers and Sellers show. We're going to talk about buying plastic pallets, how to buy plastic pallets. And it's like, well, earlier this morning in Indianapolis, it's like 28 degrees. Made me think of summertime. I love it. I'm so glad. We're just taking a few minutes here for people to get on board. So, little baby. Well, don't you cry. Well, summertime. This is the Buyers and Sellers show, the pre-show. I'm Jay Skinner, and we come on every Friday morning live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Whole variety of topics. Check out my playlist on any of those places. You should be able to find all the shows. Probably the most comprehensive and easy to one look at is the PDT Associates YouTube channel. And we have a playlist just for these shows. Makes it easy to find and go through all this stuff. And we're live. I'm Jay Skinner, and this is going to be our time together to really talk about something special. And some of you may know me also as the plasticpalletguy.com. And I know I'm doing that. I'm doing the CEOextender.com and even the methodcrm.com. PDT Associates, my company, has a multifaceted approach here. But for the last 30 years plus, I've been an international plastic pallet application analyst, designer, and manufacturer. And so today, we're going to spend some time learning about plastic pallets, how to buy them, and had this great logistics procurement smart lady contact me, and she said, "Hey, Plastic Pallet Guy, what about this?" And it's like, wow, it got me to thinking. And I wrote back some answers to her and gave her some ideas on how to approach her problem with, in this case, it was export pallets. And I said, "You've inspired me to do Friday morning on this very topic." So I'm pretty excited about that. Here's the thing. When it's like, what are the pitfalls when you're buying plastic pallets? Should you do it yourself? Or when do you pay someone like me, a buyer's agent or a plastic pallet guy or gal, to help you there? People all over the world are getting hit with crazy price increases, availability things. Maybe you've used plastic pallets before and now you're getting a different story. And then you just might want to do some shopping and figure out if what you're getting told is true or not. And I get it. I mean, we need to hold our suppliers accountable, including me, everybody. There's another thing about plastic pallets is that it seems immediately like, what can be hard about it? but you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know what your specialty is, but if I started talking about it, wouldn't you smile and say, "Oh, Jay, you don't know what you don't know"? I mean, it doesn't matter what area of business it is. People know a little bit, but they don't know what they don't know. Plastic pallets can get you into real trouble because a lot of times we're dealing with big time weight. We're dealing with international import export restrictions, and we're dealing with hygiene things. And if you're in food and pharmaceuticals, that's another thing. And if you're in the metal industry and someone says, well, I've got a pallet here that'll hold X number of pounds or kilos weight, if you just believe it without approaching it properly, it could be dangerous. And then I always talk about doing the minivan test. And what that is would you want that pallet loaded with that load riding on a truck on a curve on the interstate right beside a minivan loaded with your wife and kids? Do the minivan test when it comes to evaluating these pallets if it's going to be out on the road. And then there's trains, intermodal, and things to think about there. So it gets on and on and on. So it all seems simple enough. I mean, a load limit, you know the size, is a four-way entry, two-way entry, how many ways can you stick a forklift in it? And maybe the guy says he wants it to be a Grocery Manufacturers Association, a GMA spec. And you think, how hard can that be? Well, there's still lots of ways you can get in trouble. So we're going to talk about that. And I would encourage you on whatever platform you're looking at, watching this, even read the entire description of this broadcast because there's a lot of information there. And I'm going to go ahead. Looks like I've already got some comments here. How cool is this? Hello, Tom Ginn. Welcome. Good to see you. And I'm going to pull this over here so I can see it real good. Let's see who else we've got here. Mr. Coachman, good morning, Plastic Pallet Guy. Thank you. And people talking to each other. Tom shouting out to Charles. That's great. Hello, Charles. Good morning, Tom. Back at you. Now, I want everybody to know, and I'm going to type in here that you're all invited to post comments and questions and jump in here. As it comes to this topic of material handling and buying plastic pallets, it's going to be fun where you get quick. And I plan on being out of here at 11:05 or sooner. So that'd be Eastern time. At the same time, I'm giving you something valuable. Every time I do this, it's super important to give you something that you can take home and use or take to the office and use. And so I want you to see this, www.theplasticpalletguy.com. Let's make sure it's there. And I'm going to hit that, and that'll post it up on different locations. Hello, Sharon. Good morning. And Sharon, it's another week. Please fill us all in. We're beginning to know you with your company. I think it's called Reveal Products. You can tell me if that's not right, but you've been going live every single morning for the last 700 and some times. And the big grand finale, I don't know if you'll really quit going live, but the contest between you and a couple other people in your business is going to be a drop dead go live right after Christmas. So where are you with that? I'd sure love to know. And I'm real proud of you. Keep doing it. Okay, let's get right into plastic pallets and buying those. And it's always fun. What do people do when they're looking at something and thinking about doing something? And Sharon just said 760 today. Oh my gosh, that is fantastic. And then I want to go back here. Let's get a hold of this comment before I keep going. Boop, there we go. Now, what do people do? They Google, and this is a Google right here, just plastic pallets. And then when you Google plastic pallets, I'm going to make the screen even a little larger here so you can see some stuff. You Google it, it's daunting. And I'm just kind of working on a screen over here. It's like, look at all this. You even got prices. And I can tell you that I can see right there on that page, everything, prices going from like $19 a piece up to $250 a piece. And I can show you some plastic pallets that are even more. And honestly, can show you some pallets that are less that they don't tend to show you on this sort of stuff. But the deal is that when it comes to these plastic pallets, um, there's a lot to pick from, lots of things to choose from. And so I always want to, you know, show you that because that's what we do. We Google stuff. And when we do this, one of the things to just think is, should you do it yourself or pay someone else to do it for you when it comes to selecting your plastic pallets and looking at your whole logistics program? Um, We've looked at this. We think about it. This is the stuff that got things going last night. Prices are going up. There's decisions that were made maybe a long time ago. Some folks don't even know what the background of those decisions are, and then they're being handed as a new person, maybe something that they're unfamiliar with, and maybe not only do they not know the background of the decisions that were made for the plant, but they don't necessarily have the technical pallet know-how, wood, plastic, whatever. Um, Tell you what, you can get a packaging engineer doesn't necessarily mean, some guys are in the macro side of it and other people are in the what we call micro side of it. And so when it even comes to packaging engineers, it makes you wonder and think, who can, you know, what you can deal with. And so if you're the kind of a packaging engineer that knows about this, and let's see, Mark, hi, thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. Glad you like it. Um, it doesn't matter where you are. Some people know more things about things than others, and that's what we're here to do. Now, Charles says, I believe plastic pallets are a great item for most all businesses. I was in the liquor business for many years, and those strong plastic pallets would have been a blessing. What a way to deal with all the recyclable plastic. And that's the truth. That's a great way to deal with it. So, going on down here, it's like prices are going up, stories about availability, you're getting whipsawed with dealers and who knows whatever else as it relates to stories coming from suppliers. I mean, right now you may be running into some really weird things with your plastic pallets or your wood pallets, and you don't know what you don't know. We talked about that for sure. Um, so you got load limit, size, four-way, two-way entry, and you want to be a GMA. And then as soon as you do that, and let's just look at this for a minute. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to GMA wood pallets. You can see what GMA wood pallets look like. Right there's an example. It has a big opening on the short side if it's a 48 by 40 inch pallet, which for those of you in Europe and other places, that'd be approximately 1,200 by 1,000 about. Okay, we're in that neighborhood. Um, but we're talking about a 4840 type GMA pallet, and you can see what it looks like. It's got room for forklift into the two long sides and forklift and pallet jack or a hand truck or whatever people call it that you pump like this by hand, or maybe you have a riding device goes into the short side. But then when you type GMA plastic pallet, look what you get. These pictures still don't look exactly like that. There are very few plastic pallets that look anything like this wood pallet over here. That's an official GMA pallet. So with all that in mind, like you got to do it yourself. Sounds like a great idea, but you got to accept the risks associated with doing it yourself. And there's so many gotchas in there. And I talk about gotchas that what looks like a simple decision that you must be careful and test. And I liken it to a junior high science fair, except for you don't have to do the trifold display, the big thing in the back with the problem and the hypothesis and the procedure and the conclusions. You'll end up doing that somewhere, probably on an email to whoever's in charge of the project beside you, that where you're going to agree on what to do. But you can see when it comes to what do you do here, and what are the options. There's just a heck of a lot of options, and we all Google stuff and we look at it. So here's how I suggest that you approach this. And that's the thing is I want to give you the gold, not just tell you the problems and lead you to the edge of the cliff to look over and say, "Oh my gosh, there's so much between here and the next spot." Well, I'm going to build a bridge here. So if you want to do it yourself, here's the things you need to think about and what to do. And if you don't want to do it yourself, of course, give me a call or call someone else that you know and trust, or within your organization, find out if you've got a we generally speaking, be a mechanical packaging engineer or somebody that's specialized in pallets. If they're a packaging engineer and they specialize in just small packaging, like how to take this thing here and package it so it doesn't get damaged all by itself, they may say, well, that's great, but I did that, I didn't do packages. Or they may be a type of packaging engineer that knows how to make something like this. But if you've got one that's in the macro side and he's good on logistics, shoot, use them. A lot of times those are my clients. And I'm working together with them because they are the in the plant guy doing the work while I'm not in the plant, or I make just one visit. The rest of the time we're talking and using pictures and things like that. Looks like we got some comments here. Let's take a minute here and see what people have to say. Tom, let's say you say, I definitely don't want a load to fall on my car. Next time I'm behind a truck, I will proceed with caution and get around the truck. Good idea. When you're behind or if you're on a curve, get away from that truck. But that minivan test, that's how, I don't care what they say about this pallet has this load capacity and everything. Man, if it's over the road, please be careful. And before you put it out there on a truck with a 4,000-pound load or something, be sure that you guys have tested it so that it'll be safe. Everything's got to be safe. It's all about got to be safe. So number one, what are you doing? What's the problem? That's the one thing you have to analyze. Why are you even doing this? Identify the purpose of the pallet. Is it a one-way pallet, like you're just going to ship it from your plant to a customer, never see it again, or to another plant, or however you're going to do it? Or is it going to be for a closed loop where you're going to ship it from, look at my map back here. I'm going to ship it from Africa to South America. Look at that. I can do like that. Africa to South America, and then back again empty, and then we're going to fill it up again. We're going to put something on it and ship it back, and then we're always going to keep using it. Or is it going to be work in process inside the factory, inside your plant, where you're going to go from one machine to another as you're building the product, and you're going to use specialized plastic pallets to go in the machine. So you do the first procedure and you get the product made to one thing, and then you're going to add this to it, and then you're going to take it here and paint it, and then finally at the end you're going to take it off this specialized pallet, and it's going to go on a shipping pallet that could be wood or plastic once it's all done, wrapped and stacked and ready to go. You got to understand it, because that all means different things for pricing. And then are you replacing something that you're already doing in the plant? So if you came on board and they're using a work in process pallet in the plant, like the thousands and thousands and thousands that I sold over the years to people in flexible packaging, or in roll converting or extrusion, or the paper printing industry, or specialized pallets that virtually never leave the plant, except for if it's a closed loop shipping system where they go somewhere and come back. They never lose them because these are $150, $200 pallets or more. In some cases, depending on the size and the style, they can approach $350, $450, $500, but they last forever, the ones that I make. And I guess that's another little side is, depending on the type of plastic and what it is, do they crack, break, or chip? Are they going to hold up? Do they do what you need them to do? And how are you going to know that? You don't want to get in trouble. And this is where we talk about doing it yourself or bringing in help. I like DIY. I do tile. I know how to paint. I do some woodwork. I got a couple rental properties, and I renovated them, did most of the work myself, and I love learning all that kind of stuff. I used to work on my car, but I'll tell you what, I had all the time in the world to do it. I had one house that I worked on like a year before I was able to rent it. I learned a lot of stuff and I was able to do it, and that's fine. But if you're in a multi-million-dollar corporation, do they have time for you to learn to that level, or can you just manage the process and bring in someone like me to help you figure it out. And I talk about someone like me, the plasticpalletguy.com, because quite frankly, it's not always going to be a commission deal. A case last night, the lady was asking questions, and I said, well, here's a list of 5 different suppliers. Like, go talk to them, because you should just be buying directly from the manufacturer, because the item that she was talking about in that case was we call it export pallet. It was so commodity and so available, and so many people do it, and the specs are so varied. Just call the manufacturers, because it's been relegated to the area of commodity. And when you add a distributor in between, unless he's bringing great value, which they can, it's not worth it. Just go to the manufacturer. So now we're getting ready to talk about the RFQ, the request for quote. And let me see if there's any comments over here before I keep going. Any new ones? Let's see. Tom said, yeah, he's seen many a truckload leaning. Yep, that can be scary. And then Charles says, what's the weight difference between a hardwood GMA versus a strong plastic GMA pallet? Well, my first question when a customer asks me that is say, well, how much does your hardwood GMA weigh? But in a lot of cases, they'll just say GMA, and then we know it's anywhere from a cheap pine pallet all the way up to could be an oak GMA style pallet. And the thing is that from a weight standpoint, that wood pallet could range in weight anywhere from, we'll call it 20 pounds to 60 or 70 pounds. And just depending on the type of wood and the ultimate construction, because within the world, and I'll show you this, when I type in GMA wood pallet, look at all this. Look at all the different pallets there. Oh my gosh. And then within there are different styles and how many boards they have and the thickness and all, and the density of the wood. So a lot of times they'll say, what's the difference between a plastic pallet and a wood pallet? My question would be, well, how much does your wood pallet weigh? And then the plastic pallet either weighs a little bit more or a lot bit more or a little bit less or a lot bit less. So varied. If the ergonomics of it, Charles, are a big deal, that's where we go back up to the questions about what are the reasons for making a change. And if it's weight, then that's one of the things we always want to talk about. So let's go back to the RFQs for plastic pallets. What kind of information do you need to put with them? Not just length, width, and height, but you need to get that in there. Length, width, and height, maybe, especially if that height is important to what's going on in the process. Description of the loads, how many stacked, wrapped, handled, what the conditions look like, how you multiple stack them, what's the environment, if there's temperature or humidity issues, what is on the pallet, what's the actual product. I've had so many times over the years, someone sent me a thing, I want a plastic pallet quote, and they say, and they'll tell me it's a 4,000 pound load or a 3,000 pound load, and it's like, and then it's, goes in a standard rack or something like that, and it is a couple things, and we want to use it in the freezer, and it's like, but they might not even say that, and it's like, okay, I don't know, what if I picked up the pallet and the pallet bent a little bit? Would that be a problem? I mean, is there a problem with a little bit of give in a pallet? I don't know that there is, but there might be depending on your type of load. So how's it stacked and wrapped, and what product is in there? And if it's a bunch of metal parts, is there going to be a point load? Okay, and you just kind of keep going on and on and on. If a pallet has a stated capacity of, they call it the dynamic or moving capacity of 4,000 pounds, for instance, but all the weight is right there in the middle of that pallet, right there in the middle, right there. And it's going to drive a hole right through it like that. That's 4,000 pounds driving a hole through a pallet that's supposedly supposed to hold 4,000 pounds. Well, you didn't mention it needs to be all spread out and wrapped in such a way that the load is not concentrated. See, that's the stuff you have to think about. And when you're putting those RFQs out there, you want to include special considerations like hygiene, safety, pallet racks, conveyors, robots. What exactly are you doing now? And what problems are you having? Probably one of the best things you can explain to me is here's what we've done, here's what works, and here's what doesn't work. It's like, thank you. And we all work together. It's very collaborative. Probably a little painful because of all that's involved in pulling it out there, but it's the difference between a shade tree mechanic and a real step-by-step procedural way of doing a project. And I wanted to show you that here. And by the way, when it comes to these pallets, I'm going to flip over here. We always talk about the plasticpalletguy.com. And when you go there, you'll get to my website, which, by the way, you can find the show playlist of everything for the last 10 months right up here. Now it's going on 11. But go down here. Here's an example of specialized plastic pallets. These are concepts. And in this case, there's a cradle there to put a roll and a special device that's going to be molded in to hold the roll from falling out, or if the rolls are all cut in slits and slices, keep them from falling over. And this will also be good and usable with a robotic system. Here's something where these devices are actually going to be molded into the pallet. Again, perfect use of using these things to help corral a load, and at the same time, robotics would come into play. Here's your four-way entry type pallet with holes on this side, holes on this side. Here's slotted top pallet, very highly specialized. This is off my website. These are the kinds of drawings we come up with them in 3D and everything for what you might need. Anyway, going back to our step-by-step approach. Here's your actions. Now we're got 5 more minutes left in the show. Action 1 is narrow down the plastic molding type that will likely work. If, is there a mold already in existence for the right size and configuration to do the job? I tell people when they come to me, it's like, well, first thing I'm going to see, is the pallet that you need already made somewhere? And if it's just easy for you to go and buy it, it's like, go get them. I don't need to get in the middle of it. If it's in Europe or Australia or Africa, or there's a lot of technical aspects to procuring it that it's like, man, you probably want me to work on this together with you, then I stay with you and I'll do it, whatever it takes. But, and what type of molding? It's not just plastic. There's different types of plastic. There's expanded polystyrene, which is some people might consider a type of plastic. There's blow molded. What is that? There's injection molded plastics. There's thermoformed. There's solid wall molded. I also call it rotationally molded. All these different technologies of molding. Well, what kind of plastic pallet do you need? Do you need injection, thin wall, thick wall, or structural foam? What's the difference? Well, those are the questions. Those are the questions that are going to make a big difference between the durability of the pallet, how long it'll last, and how it'll perform. And then can you mold steel reinforcement into it when you need additional reinforcement? What types of things go in there? Or are they using types of rods or some sort of type of reinforcement ability so that you can put it in a specialized pallet rack and they won't bend down? See, on and on and on and on. Stop. Once you figure out about what it's supposed to look like, what it's going to cost about, then can you afford it? Right now, probably an essential part of the PDT, the product development team, process development team, the people development team when it comes to procurement, and the plastic pallet development team is look at this thing and can you afford it? If the right pallet to do the job is going to cost too much, you don't even need to go any further. Keep doing what you're doing that's cheaper, I guess. Make sure you do a good evaluation, because sometimes you can't afford to not switch. In the folding carton industry, and that's the industry that makes these and other food boxes and things like this, back in the 90s, they discovered they could not afford to stay with the old wood pallets that were being used in their plants, just from a hygiene standpoint. They couldn't afford someone to open up one of these things and get a piece of wood or some mold or some sort of a spot on the side of here that came from something that came off a wood pallet in our plant. And so highly specialized designed pallets made of super heavy duty plastic pallets by yours truly were developed and put all over the world. And eventually the flexible packaging industry that manufactures films and plastic bags and stuff like this discovered that they also needed my highly specialized pallets so that they could move them around the plant and there was no chance that this film would get contaminated by the wood. And the guy down the street that didn't do it ended up out of business because he needed to meet hygiene requirements and didn't think that plastic pallet on his product was that important. Crazy, but the truth. So let's say you figured out the money can work. The second action, get a couple test pallets of each possibility to do the science fair testing and buy them. I mean, if people want to give you free pallets, you can decide if you want to take them or not. Sometimes a guy will give you a couple free pallets and you pay for the freight or something like that. You can always work together. But I always recommend that you make an investment as you're doing it for multiple reasons. One is it shows your prospective supplier that you're serious. They will also kind of say, well, he's throwing wood into the fire, and so I'll give him heat. And you're working together in a collaborative way rather than a one-way type of vendor relationship. Remember, the silver rule is do unto your vendors what you want your customers to do unto you. And if you want your customers always asking for free stuff for them to test, asking you, then you ask other people. I mean, just kind of like karma. I suggest, like what I do when I go to the grocery store or anywhere else with vendors, I don't beg for a free product. I work on something. Let's say let's buy a couple of these test pallets. Give me a good price for that. We'll see if it'll work. But do your work up front before you spend even a nickel. And then make some purchases and buy a couple of pallets that you think could be right. And buy at least 2 of each so you can experiment with how they nest, how they stack, and that you get the idea of how they interface with one another when they're empty, because that's important too. So, and then you approach your testing like you're at the science fair. Like I said earlier, you just don't have to do that trifold display in the back. Next, action 3, make a decision and buy another test group, like 50 or 100, to put into live use for a period of time. Once you've tested 2 or 3 or 5 and you've bought those, put them into action, you've taken pictures, you've done even destructive testing with those, then you say, okay, I think this will work. Well, can you buy 50 or 100 and do another level of test? Takes a little bit longer, but just to make sure you didn't miss something. It's all about risk reward. If you go, man, we've got to get this done, then buy a bunch. And if you find out, holy cow, we missed this or that, don't plan on sending the pallets back, because these pallets are not something you can ever send back. So I always encourage you, just buy what you can use and you can keep. And I never found anybody that couldn't use a few pallets somewhere, even if the ones they bought were not exactly ideal once they got into testing. Okay, now let's see. Looks like we got some more comments here. Let's see what people are saying here. Hey there, Ron Goodwin. He says, we use plastic pallets in our back room to keep cardboard sheet boxes off the cement floor. It keeps the cardboard from soaking up moisture. You bet. That is a good reason. And Ron is in the a custom shirt business where he makes shirts and does printing on them. So thank you, Ron. Okay, moving on. So we talked about making that decision, but here's the final action. If the testing all went well, then buy all you want. Look critically during all this at all the elements, including cracking or breaking and what caused it, so you're not surprised 6 months down the road. And that's where I do recommend in this testing phase here, especially here, pay attention to cracks, breaks, chips, damage to the pallet, and decide if that's acceptable to you. You can buy some pallets, like what they call export pallets, that you're lucky they'll get from here to your customer and not be broken somehow, somewhere. but it's sufficient to get it there. There's different levels of export pallets from strength. Then there's other levels of types of pallets that are made other different ways, and maybe they're good for 6 to 18 months of continuous use, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there's other pallets like the ones I sold the most of over the years that you can anticipate if it's the right pallet under the right circumstances and everything's put in position like it's supposed to be. It's not unusual for someone to walk into a plant 10, 15, or 20 years later and see those plastic pallets still functional, still working beautifully, dirty, scratched up, maybe sliced in different places probably, but quite functional. So you pay for what you get. Sometimes you pay too much for something that doesn't do so well. So you got to make sure. That's why the testing phase is so important. You do this, you're going to be a happy camper. And that's how you buy plastic pallets. Everyone, I want to tell you, thank you so much for taking this time with me. I mentioned earlier, do unto your vendors as you want your customers to do unto you. And I encourage you to think about that. And certainly, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm very available. Just go to theplasticpalletguy.com. That's a great place to go. And you'll see my information. There's a page up here that says more about you. Go there. You'll find my information. I'm going to check one time, see, I make sure I didn't lose or miss anybody, any comments here. It's like, oh, we're in good shape. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a great day, a great weekend. I'll be back next Friday at 10:35 with more Buyers and Sellers Show. I really appreciate your support. In the meantime, have a great day. Well, I'm going to Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. I kind of like that song. Well, I'm going to Kansas City. Oh, Kansas City, here I come. Got some crazy little pallets. I'm going to get me one. See you next week. Thanks for coming.